Welcome back, everyone. Today we're going to talk about Genesis 4, verse 13. And Cain said to the Lord, "My punishment is greater than I can bear." This verse is Cain's first direct response to God's decree. While it may sound like remorse, the Zohar and Midrash expose it as a moment of self-pity, not through teshuvah, repentance. It is not the voice of a repentant soul, but one overwhelmed by the consequence of estrangement, a man who regrets the weight of justice, not the depth of his sin. The very first phrase we have, "And Cain said," the speech of the condemned soul. Until now, Cain has refused to speak truthfully. He lied, he deflected, he denied. Now, under the pressure of the curse, he finally speaks directly, but only of himself. He lamented his fate, not his act. He wept for his burden, not his brother. This teaches that there are two kinds of sorrow. One that leads to repair and one that leads to despair. Cain chooses the second. He speaks out of fear, not transformation. The Midrash interprets Cain's words as a protest, not repentance. He's not saying, "I deserve punishment." He's saying, "It's too much." Some sages even say Cain complains to God, accusing him of being too harsh. Next, we have the phrase, "my punishment," or "my sin," a Hebrew mystery. In Hebrew, the word is used avoni, which can mean either my sin or my punishment. This ambiguity is key. The Zohar explores both meanings. If it means my sin, then Cain is finally acknowledging guilt, recognizing the enormity of what he has done. He looked into the depth of his soul and trembled. This would be a moment of spiritual awakening. If it means my punishment, then Cain is merely focused on his suffering, not the suffering he caused. He cried for himself, not for heaven, not for the soul he severed. The Midrash leans toward the second reading. Cain is self-centered, lamenting the hardship, not the wrongdoing. Next, we have the phrase, "greater than I can bear," collapsing under justice. Cain is overwhelmed by the weight of divine justice. The Zohar teaches that sin corrupts the vessel of the soul. Once the light departs, the sinner is left with a crushing void. He tasted the bitterness of exile, for he had exiled his own soul from the light. In this state, the soul cannot hold the consequences of its distortion. The burden isn't external, it's the disconnect itself. One Midrash paints Cain as bargaining with God, asking for the punishment to be lightened. Others say he feared being hunted by other descendants of Adam. He is thinking about survival, not sanctity. This reflects a soul that grieves the fallout, but still hasn't broken through to redemption. The spiritual meaning behind the verse, regret versus repentance. True teshuvah requires brokenness with clarity, not just feeling bad, but returning to the root. Cain's words are full of emotion, but devoid of tikkun, rectification. He does not seek to make amends, restore order, or connect to holiness. He mourned the loss of favor, but not the loss of righteousness. The Zohar compares this to souls in Gehinnom who cry out not because they love God, but because they suffer the distance. The Midrash says God still responded with mercy later, not because Cain repented, but because divine compassion never fully withdraws. God would later mark Cain for protection, not as a reward, but as a gesture of divine restraint. To summarize, Genesis 4 verse 13 captures Cain's emotional reaction to divine justice. The Zohar and Midrash unpack this moment as the cry of the unrepentant soul, filled with regret but not return. The phrase, "and Cain said," Zohar first true words after layers of denial, but still centered on self. The Midrash says this is a protest, not confession. The phrase, "my punishment is greater than I can bear," the Zohar says this is two readings. Either he glimpses his guilt or he complains about the cost. The Midrash says most likely the latter. He grieves for his own pain, not Abel's. Cain collapses beneath the spiritual weight of his actions, but does not yet seek atonement. He is a man who feels sorrow, but not transformation. This verse teaches not all tears lead to redemption. Some are walls of regret that still resist the gate of return. The soul must move beyond sorrow into responsibility to truly heal. That's it for today. Thank you very much for your donation. Be blessed, everyone, and I will see you on the next episode.